Hello everybody and welcome to this theory video which is looking at theme 1's 1.2. So we're looking here at how markets work. Now the bit of the specification which we will be looking at in this video is 1.2.1 rational decision making and 1.2.2 demand. 1.2.3 will come later once we finish looking at these first two. So 1.2.3 will be in a future video. Right, everyone. Now, before I go through any of the theory on this screen here, I just want to introduce the concept of the free market economy again. Now, remember, in a free market economy, the resource allocation decisions are made between the interactions of consumers and producers. So governments have got a very limited role in the workings of a free market economy. The role of the government is to enforce property rights. So the questions of what, how and for whom are decided between consumers and producers. Now, across our economy, we have lots of what we call markets. We have the housing market, the holiday market, the leisure market, the utilities market, the transport markets, the retail markets. And in all of these different markets, what we have are demanders and suppliers. So those that demand are the people that buy the goods and services, whereas the suppliers are the people that produce and then sell the different goods and services. Now you've got to think about the interaction of these two different sets of people. The people that buy the products, in other words, the consumers or the people that demand goods and services, they're buying goods and services to satisfy their wants and needs. And the logic would be that what consumers would want when they demand goods and services is to pay the lowest possible price. Businesses, when they produce goods and services, they're doing so to generate profit. So they would ideally want to sell at the highest possible price. So the idea would be that these consumers, these producers will interact and barter and negotiate on prices. Consumers try to barter prices down, whereas producers will try to barter prices up. Now, the reason why we're all doing this is that we're all trying to be as rational as possible. Now, what a rational consumer would do when they demand goods and services, they would, if they'd been rational, demand the combination of goods and services which maximizes their satisfaction. Now, economists call this utility. So what we will try to do is to buy a bundle of goods and services which we think will meet the most of our wants and needs. And that would be increasing our economic welfare. Now, logically, if we can barter prices downwards, we can buy more and satisfy more wants and needs. Producers, well, if they're being rational, they will produce the goods and services which they think will generate them the most profit. Okay, which again would be why they try to barter prices upwards so they can generate more profit. So a good example could be, think about a second-hand car salesman. When that second-hand car salesman is trying to sell a car, they're a supplier in the car market, and they want to charge the highest possible price for that car to give them most profit on that particular car they're trying to sell. The people looking to buy that car will be looking to pay the lowest possible price to meet their wants and needs. So this consumer, this producer would interact in the car market to hopefully fulfill the wants and needs of both the buyers and the sellers, so the demanders and the suppliers. So remember, rational people, rational consumers will try to buy things at the lowest possible price to maximize their economic welfare. Firms will try to sell at the highest possible price to generate as much profit as possible. Now, it is worth noting that consumers often aren't very rational. And this is a big inaccuracy of the free market model. So think about what we're saying. If we were rational consumers, we would always weigh up the benefits and the drawbacks of different goods and services that we buy. And we would buy exactly, right here, right now, what will maximize our economic welfare. Now, there is a strand of economics that we call behavioral economics. And what we're doing here, we're exploring why people are not always rational. And here are three really, really good reasons why people might not be rational. We have something we call habitual behavior. And this could be where you constantly keep buying the same goods and services that you've always bought. And you're not reflecting or reviewing whether those are still the right things for you to be buying. So the idea is over time, what we want to buy, what meets our wants and needs will change. If we don't adapt what we buy, then we're no longer being rational. We're buying things that used to be good for us to buy, which are no longer the best things for us to buy. Okay, so for example, as I've grown older, I've adapted the goods and services that I buy, but some of the things I buy out of pure habit. So for example, every other week I still go to watch Doncaster Rovers play. Does it always satisfy lots of my wants and needs? It's debatable, but because I've always gone, I'm always going to keep on going. You could argue that has been quite irrational. It's not the best use of my time and money to be constantly watching that rubbish football. The next one is something called herding behaviour. And this is where you don't buy the goods and services which maximises your own welfare or utility. You will instead buy things based on what other people buy. And this could be friends or family or celebrities. So it could be that your friends all buy a particular brand or a particular product. And to be part of that crowd, you buy exactly the same product. It might not be the best one for you because everyone else has bought it. You feel like you should be buying that one as well. The final one is something that we call computational problems. And this is when you buy complex goods and services. Now, with these, it's very difficult to work out all the benefits and all the costs of these products. And that makes it very, very difficult to be rational. So a good example could be going to university. When people go to university, they don't always fully understand all the benefits of going and doing a degree. They might not fully understand all the costs and all the implications of going to university. So if they're not able to put value on these different benefits and costs, then it's very, very difficult to be a rational consumer. But for now, everyone, we're going to assume is that people are rational when they enter markets and make decisions, either as consumers or producers. Right now, for the rest of this video, what we're going to be focusing on are the consumers. The producers, the suppliers, will come in a future video. Right now, anyway, then, we're going to be focusing on the consumers then for the rest of this video. Now, from now on, I'm going to call the consumers the demanders. So demand, you've got a definition of it here. It's people's willingness and ability to buy goods and services at a given price at a given period of time. Now, think about the two important things in this sentence though, willingness and ability. To be a buyer in a marketplace, you've got to be both willing and able. So that means you've got to want it and you've got to be able to afford it. Now, clearly it's possible to be willing but not able. So I'm willing, for example, to have a big luxurious foreign holiday every year, but I'm not able to afford it. So that means I cannot be a consumer in that market on an annual basis. But it's also possible to be able but not willing. So, for example, I'm able to go and buy a new car right now, but I'm not willing to go and buy a new car. So that means I'm not going to be a consumer in the car market for the foreseeable future. Right now, in the diagram at the bottom of the page, I have drawn a basic demand curve. Now, this demand curve is drawn on the assumption of ceteris paribus. Now, there are lots and lots of different things which would influence your demand for a product. What I'm looking at here is how price affects the demand for a product. All the other things which would affect demand, I am holding constant. So I'm making the assumption of ceteris paribus. Now, in the diagram below, imagine we start off at P1, Q1. So on the horizontal axis, we've got quantity, and on the vertical axis, we've got price. So we're going to start off at P1, Q1. So what this means at price 1, people are willing and able to buy Q1 of this product. Now, if there was an increase in price, that higher price would lead to demand falling to Q3. With the logic being, as the price goes up, people become less willing and able to buy this product. So when the price goes up and demand goes down, we call this a contraction in demand. We've moved along the demand curve, which means that there's a smaller market for this good and service. If we start off at P1, Q1 again, and we go to P2, it means the price has fallen. And as prices fall from P1 to P2, we're now going to have an increase in demand. So as price levels fall, people become more willing and able to buy the product. So we're going to get an extension in demand. Now, it's also worth noting that what we can do from this diagram, we can work out the revenue for businesses. Okay, so if I was looking at P1Q1, I would go up from zero quantity, zero price, all the way to P1. So we're generating that price of every single good that's sold, and you would multiply this by Q1 to work out the revenue for the business. Now that big rectangle from P1 all the way to the demand curve, vertically down to Q1 and back to the axis at zero, would measure the total revenue for the business. Clearly, if price went up to P3, then revenue would now be from P3 to the demand curve horizontally, vertically down to Q3, and then back to zero at the starting point again. So we can work out the total revenue that businesses generate at different price levels by looking at demand curves. Right, now what we've therefore got then is a negative relationship between price and demand. So this means as prices go up, demand will fall. We're going to get that contraction in demand. If price levels fall, then we're going to get higher demand. So we're going to have an extension in demand. Now, there are three different reasons why this happens. We've got the income effect, the substitute effect, and then something we call diminishing marginal utility. Now, the income effect is pretty logical, really. Your income will carry a certain spending power. So there'll be a certain purchasing power of your money. So logic would be if price levels fall, your money can now be used to buy more goods and services. So logically, if price levels fall, your income can buy more, so you will buy more goods and services. Now, obviously, if price levels were to increase, then the purchasing power of your money will fall, and that would mean that your demand would contract because you become less willing and able to buy different goods and services. Now, another reason is something that we call the substitute effect. So for this, let's think about Coca-Cola and Pepsi. If the price of a can of Coca-Cola was to go up, then the substitute effect would mean that people would shift their demand to cheaper rival products. So you might go and buy more Pepsi and demand less Coke. So if the price of Coca-Cola was to go up from P1 to P3 in that diagram at the top of the page, then people would lower their demand for Coca-Cola because of the higher price, and you're going to go and demand rival products instead. Now, clearly, if you were to lower the price of Coca-Cola, people would stop buying as much Pepsi, and that would lead to an extension in the demand for Coca-Cola. Okay, so the income effect and the substitute effect are two key reasons why we have this negative relationship between price and demand. In other words, price goes down, demand goes up. If price goes up, demand will go down. Right, now on this slide, I'm going to explain the concept of diminishing marginal utility. Now, marginal means additional. Utility is satisfaction. Diminishing, in effect, means it's going down. Now, I'm going to use cups of tea to explain this here. So you can see on my diagram here, I've got the price of the cup of tea, and I've got the quantity of tea that somebody will buy. Now, look at this. For that first cup of tea, this person is willing and able to pay £1 for this product. So what they've done, they've been rational, and they've worked out that roughly that first cup of tea will be worth £1 for them. Now look at the second cup of tea. For that second cup of tea, the person is only willing and able to pay 80p for that second or additional cup of tea. The third cup of tea would only be worth up to 60p for the individual. And this is all because of the theory of diminishing marginal utility. Now think about why. That first cup of tea, it will quench that person's thirst. It will taste very nice. It will maybe even fill them up a little bit. And they will get lots of satisfaction from that first cup of tea. Now the second cup of tea will create less satisfaction or utility than that first cup of tea. The logic being that, the first one has filled you up a little bit. It's quenched your thirst. The second one will not give you as much satisfaction as that first one, so you would place less value on that second cup of tea. The third cup of tea will give you even less satisfaction. So guys, I've seen this in an exam paper where it's been linked to plates of food at an all-you-can-eat buffet. The logic would be the first plate of food would give you most satisfaction, the second plate of food would give you less satisfaction, and the third plate of food would give you even less satisfaction. So rationally, if it's going to give you less satisfaction for that third plate of food, you place less value on it and therefore pay a lower price for it than what you would do the first to place a food. So that's another reason why the demand shows a negative relationship between price and demand. Right, just give you a bit of a pause. What I'd like to do, please, can you jot down question 1? This goes from A to G. Hit pause, please. Write down your answers. And when you think you're ready, hit play and we'll carry on with the rest of the video. Right, now in the last part of this video, we were looking at movements along a demand curve. Now, what we were doing was we were assuming ceteris paribus. The only thing that we were changing when we moved up and down a demand curve was price. So as price went up, demand would contract. If price went down, demand would extend. And the reasons for that were the theories of diminishing marginal utility, the income effect, and the substitute effect. Right, now when I show demand shifting, this is for what we call non-price reasons. So what I'm now doing, I'm holding price as constant. So look at the bottom left diagram. We've got here an increase in demand for non-price reasons. So at price 1, people used to be willing and able to demand Q1. But at price 1, people are now willing and able to demand Q2. So the same price, people are now willing and able to buy more goods and services. Now, it's worth noting again that we can work out from this the total revenue for the business. If I start off where the two axes cross each other at 0, if I go vertically up to P1, and then horizontally across the demand one, and then down to Q1, that rectangle would show the original total revenue. When demand moves outwards, we can see that revenue will increase, and it will increase by the additional rectangle. So Q1 to Q2, up to demand 2, and then horizontally across to D1. So we've got an increase in total revenue driven by the outward shift in demand. So for non-price reasons, people become more willing and able to buy products. Now on the bottom right-hand side diagram, we've got the exact opposite. We've got a reduction in demand for non-price reasons. So at the same price level of P1, people are now less willing and able to buy these goods and services. So that will mean that people in the bottom right-hand diagram, they now feel they're going to get less satisfaction or utility when they buy these goods and services at price 1. In the bottom left-hand diagram, as demand moves outwards, at price 1, people now gain extra satisfaction or utility from demanding these goods and services. Right, let's think about what will make demand move outwards or inwards. Now, look at the list of things that I've put down here. If we were looking at, let's say, the demand for, let's say, Nando's, at the same price level, people might become more willing and able to buy if Nando's receive lots of positive publicity. So if lots of celebrities endorse their products, then people become more willing and able to buy. If Nando's fiercely advertise their products and make people more aware about them, again, people become more willing and able to buy. It could be seasonal. When you think about Nando's, they produce lots of chicken. These are quite light products. Well, it's possible that in warmer times of the year, there might be a high demand for these products than what there would be in winter when people tend to want more stodgy things to eat. It could be driven by an increase in income. So think about the income effect. If people have got more income, then they're more able to buy things like Nando's and eat out more regularly. So at the same price level, people become more willing and able to buy. Now, it could be that what we call the substitutes have increased their price, or they received bad publicity. So substitutes are what we call competing goods and services. So what it could be is that a rival product for Nando's could be Kentucky Fried Chicken, it could be McDonald's. If those businesses raise their prices or they receive bad publicity at Nando's original prices, people become more willing and able to buy Nando's. Now, it could be complements as well. Now, complements are what we call things that we buy in joint demand. So, for example, when you go to the cinema, you might buy popcorn. Those products go together, if you like. Now, for a lot of people, it could be that a Nando's meal is a complement for going to the cinema. So if the cinema were to reduce their prices, or to have new films available on show that people want to go and see, if the cinema becomes more popular, it would raise the demand for Nando's food as well. Now, if I flip all these different things round, I get the reasons for an inward shift in demand. Now, to give you a few ideas, everyone, if I go back to this diagram, let's imagine we're looking at the demand for a holiday in Tenerife. Now, at price one, if demand moves inwards, people become less willing and able at that price to go on holiday to Tenerife. Well, think about what could have caused this to happen. It could be really, really bad publicity. Maybe there's been lots of publicity talking about a massive surge in the number of cockroaches in hotels in Tenerife. That would mean that people become less willing and able to go to Tenerife. It could be that incomes have fallen, which means people literally cannot afford to go to Tenerife. It could be that substitutes for Tenerife, such as, let's say, Italy or other parts of Spain or France, have become better quality or cheaper in price. People are more likely to go to them than what they would be Tenerife. It could even be driven by compliments. So a compliment to a holiday in Tenerife could be the plane to get you there. So if the flight becomes more expensive, people become less willing and able to go to Tenerife on holiday. Right, so you've got all these different ideas down here that you can talk about for what would lead to demand either shifting outwards or inwards. Just a few more things here I want to show you. Let's think about the impact of changes in income. Now, what I've assumed so far is that when incomes increase, people become more willing and able to buy goods and services. So demand will shift outwards. Now, that is true for the vast majority of goods and services. This could be, Nando's, going to the cinema, cars, holidays, etc., TVs. If you earn more money at the original price level, you become more willing and able to buy these products. But we also have inferior goods. When income increases, demand for these products will fall. Now, inferior goods tend to be things such as supermarket own brands. It could be bus travel, etc. So these are things that people demand because their income is too low. So if their income was to increase, they would turn their back on inferior goods. So a good example, if someone's income was to fall, they may no longer be able to afford their car. So if they're no longer able to afford their car, then they would go and demand public transport instead. So when you look at the bottom left-hand diagram, everyone, a normal good, if you earn more, you buy more. But also bottom right, if you earn less, you will buy less. Whereas an inferior good, if I look at the bottom left-hand diagram, this could be driven by a drop in income. So if you earn less money, you might demand more own brand produce from supermarkets, you might buy more bus travel. But also, if you were to get a pay rise, you would demand less of these inferior goods as well. Right, substitutes and complements, everybody. Now, for the top two diagrams, I've used the example of tea and coffee. Now, remember, substitute goods are rival products. So they're goods that you can swap one for the other. So it could be Nike and Adidas. It could be Sky Sports, BT Sport. It could be McDonald's and Burger King, PlayStation and Xbox. Now, the logic would be, look at these two diagrams here. In the first diagram, I've got the tea market. In the second diagram, I've got the coffee market. Now, if I was to raise the price of tea, then people will buy less tea. And that would lead to the demand for coffee moving outwards. So as tea becomes more expensive, coffee will become more popular. Okay, so as tea becomes more expensive, we're going to get a contraction in demand, and that would lead to an outward shift in demand for coffee. So the original coffee price, people become more willing and able to buy. Now, the bottom example is for complements. Now, remember, complements are goods that are in joint demand. So a good example could be a games console and a game. It could be car and petrol. It could be fish and chips. In this example here, I put aeroplane flights and hotels. So look at the bottom left-hand diagram. If aeroplane flights were to become more expensive, it would lower the demand for hotels across the world. Because if aeroplane flights become more expensive, people become less willing and able to buy. We get that contraction in demand, and that would lead to demand for hotels moving inwards. So the same price for hotels, people become less willing and able to buy. Right, guys, just to draw things to a close, what I would now like to do, please, is to hit pause, jot down these questions and put down your answers, and be prepared to show me your answers for these questions when we're back in class together. Okay, everyone, thank you very much.